Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar on how to start, launch, and grow a successful podcast to grow your business in 3 achievable steps. So thank you very much for having us today. I'm really excited to be here and to help you guys just to get to know what podcasting is and how it can help grow your business and your product's reach. So before getting into the core of the webinar, I'm just going to introduce you to what Captivate is, what podcasting is, and what you can expect from this webinar. So first off, who am I and what is Captivate? So my name's Rachel and I'm the marketing coordinator here at Repurposing Media. Since 2014, we've been creating technology and education that helps drive innovation in podcasting from our home in Sheffield in the United Kingdom. We're the team behind Podcast Websites, a WordPress solution for podcasters, the Podcast Success Academy, an online learning platform for podcasters, and Captivate FM, the world's only growth-oriented podcast host that allows you to host multiple podcasts for one single monthly cost with 0 contracts. Captivate has been designed and built from day one by podcasters to give independent podcast creators the freedom and flexibility to do what they do best, which is experiment, explore, and expand their audio influence. We'll get into what Captivate actually is and how it can help podcasters in just a few minutes, but for now, I'm just going to move on to the next slide. So you'll come away from this webinar with the basic tools and steps to start, launch a podcast and grow it effectively. I've broken this webinar down into 3 sections that will explain those 3 steps and give you a basic toolkit to help you bring your podcast to life. The 3 sections are, so number 1, the practical side to starting a podcast, where I'll cover the equipment and the kind of software you'll need to start recording and give you a brief overview of how to get your podcast on the major directories like Apple, Google, Spotify, Pandora, etc. Number two is distributing and repurposing your podcast for growth. So I'll cover repurposing your podcast episodes into blog posts, videos, and other content in order to drive SEO benefit and drive traffic to your business's website or your product's website, as well as some other tips for optimizing your podcast for search. And number 3, launching and growing your podcast in 5 simple secrets, where I'll talk you through some of the tried and tested approaches we've used to successfully grow and market podcasts here at Repurposing Media that you can copy and apply to your own podcast. So first off, what is a podcast? A podcast is an audio program which is focused on a particular topic or a theme. So cycling, economics, or business, but you can also have podcasts like that are focused on interviews, that are focused on history, music, anything you want basically. So you subscribe to a podcast with an app on your phone and listen to episodes wherever you like on your headphones in the car or through speakers. So if you have like an Alexa or a Google Home, any kind of voice assistant, you can get podcasts through those now. So the beauty of podcasts is that they can be any length. They can really be anything that you want them to be. So you could do 5-minute little snippets. You could do 30-minute investigations into a certain topic, or you can go a bit like Dan Carlin's Hardcore History and do 4-hour history lessons. And they can be any frequency. You can publish anytime you like. So our podcast here, we publish it 3 times a week. You can publish it once or twice a month. It's really up to you. Whatever you decide to do with your podcast, you can basically do it. And they can cover any topic or relate directly to your business or your community or your industry. Whatever your idea, there will be an audience for it. And why would you want to start a podcast? So many people start podcasts because they're passionate about a certain subject or have an area of expertise that they want to share, like marketing or graphic design. Maybe they have a business, maybe they're an expert in something, maybe they've written a book. A podcast is a great way to promote areas of your business and build an audience for your brand. So that's really one of the main reasons why people pick up podcasting, is to build this kind of community and reach your audience and reach your target customers and your target listeners more closely. So I've listed some benefits of starting a podcast here. So you can share your expertise with like-minded individuals, give your business an extra marketing channel by driving traffic to your podcast website, to your actual website. You can start a mailing list around your podcast, send out a newsletter, things like that. You can grow a community of fans around your business or brand, host interviews or guest on other podcasts to raise your business's profile, promote your business, industry, or community through advertising within your podcast episodes, and generate income for your business and podcast by starting a Patreon or working with sponsors. There are tons and tons of options for if you want to grow a podcast, if you want to grow a business. They kind of go hand in hand. So it really is a perfect medium if you're wanting to kind of expand your product's reach, expand your brand's reach, whatever you want really. So without further ado, let's get started on the first thing anyone who's starting a podcast will need. So this is the practical side to starting a podcast. It's things like the equipment you're going to need, how you're going to record your episodes, edit your episodes, and publish your episodes. So really, it's really, really simple once you actually think about it, and you can do it on a really low budget. You can even do it for free. Podcasting started as a DIY medium, and there's no reason why you can't do it on a shoestring budget. I've split this section up into 3 different sections. So we've got equipment, recording, and hosting. And these are the most basic and important things to have in place when you start a podcast. So number 1 is equipment. And this topic is very contentious. Everyone's got an opinion on what's worth money and what to avoid. But at the very least, get yourself a pair of headphones, a microphone, and a quiet place to record. Further down the line, you might want to invest in a pop shield and a mixing deck, but to get up and running, you really don't need a lot in the way of equipment. You also might already have a lot of equipment, for example, if you're in audio or music to begin with, so that might be really advantageous for you anyway. But here I've written down my recipe for success here. So there is a microphone of choice here. So I've recommended the Samsung Q2U, which is just a really sturdy, good quality beginner's mic, usually available for under $100. Headphones, and then recording and editing software. So you can get a lot of this stuff for free. You can get Audacity for free, which allows you to record and chop up your episodes and edit them. We also really recommend this brilliant piece of software called Squadcast for remote and group recordings. So if you're going to record with 2 or 3 people, you don't need to be in the same room, which is really good for these days. And then we've got Alitu for podcast editing. So that's a really easy kind of drag and drop situation for editing a podcast. And then, of course, Captivate for your podcast hosting. So there's a lot of choice for beginners and pros and all ranges of budget, and our CEO Mark has put together a directory of his choice equipment on Amazon, which I've linked to in a couple of slides' time. These have all been tried and tested by us, so you can rest assured they come recommended by actual podcasters. So moving on then, what is a podcast host exactly? A podcast host acts as a bridge between you, the podcast host, the creator, and the podcast directories like Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. It's kind of like a middleman in between both of you. So simply put, a podcast hosting platform is a place to upload your audio files, show notes, and cover art, basically everything that makes up your podcast episodes. Your chosen host will then literally host your audio files, just like a website host, and generate an RSS feed, which is submitted to the directories. This is what we see and what we download from in our chosen podcast apps. There are loads of podcast hosts to choose from, and they're all really, really good. So it's worth doing your research into what's important for you, what feels right, where you want to take your podcast, and how much you want it to grow. I'm going to talk a little bit about the benefits exclusively to Captivate podcast hosting a little bit. So on Captivate, you can host unlimited shows. So that means that you're not limited to just one podcast. You can create as many as you like, which is really good for beginners, especially if you're wanting to experiment with different shows, different topics, different formats. There's advanced IAB certified analytics. So what that means is that the analytics and the performance data that you'll get from your podcast is standardized by the industry. So it's going to be 100% accurate and super reliable. We also have customizable podcast websites, players, and WordPress integrations. So if you don't have a website already, you can generate one for free. They're fully customizable. They're fully responsive. They've got tons and tons and tons of features on them, such as email opt-in forms for mailing lists, pinned episodes, loads of functionality. And then we also have WordPress integration, which is brilliant if you have an existing website already. So you can integrate your Captivate podcasting with your WordPress dashboard seamlessly. We have built-in call to action buttons, a one-click sponsor kit, and easy to share single subscription links. So they're all brilliant tools to help you market and grow your podcast as you start to maybe look for monetization opportunities, maybe looking for sponsorships, looking for ways to market your podcast and your other content. So to recap, get yourself some decent hardware and software for recording and publishing your podcast. You can use a simple microphone and whatever headphones you have to start with, and you can try recording with free software like Audacity. You need to secure podcast hosting. This will allow you to distribute your podcast and set up a free podcast website, as well as give you access to marketing and analytics tools that you won't find elsewhere. So now on to the next section, which is distributing and repurposing your podcast for growth. So podcasts take time to produce, so it makes sense that you'd want to get the most mileage out of them that you can. Lots of Captivate podcasters produce transcripts of their shows, which is great for accessibility as well as producing written content. And creating YouTube videos from your episodes is becoming more and more popular. After all, YouTube is the most second search website on the internet, and it is an incredible, powerful search engine in its own right. So why consider this option? Why repurpose your podcast? It gives your audience another medium to consume your content, which is super, super valuable if you're trying to sell a product, if you're trying to expand your reach, expand your business's reach. It helps build online community and foster those relationships with your audience more closely. And it's good for SEO and helping your content to rank highly, which ultimately is what you want, especially if you're running a website for your business. You want your content to be in front of your audience's eyes. You want it to be ranking highly and performing well. And we do this with our podcasts, Captivate Insider and the Podcast Accelerator, as you can see on the right hand side of the screen. The former is live streamed on Facebook. So we live stream Captivate Insider once a week on Facebook, which helps us to further build community and engage podcasters at all levels. And the Podcast Accelerator is published 3 times a week as both a podcast and a YouTube series. And that helps us really reach audiences that might not know about the podcast or what podcasting is, but are nevertheless engaged in or curious about podcasting. We also take this video and repurpose it into captioned social posts for LinkedIn. So for one podcast episode, we get at least 2 or 3 different marketing mediums out of the same content. If you're running a business, thinking about having regular guests on your podcast, or just wanting to build an audience, repurposing your podcast is a great way to do it in a way that doesn't consume lots of resources or take a lot of time to do. You can record video at the same time as recording your audio, then use tools like Headliner, Subly, or Canva to create clips and visuals. Another way in which we repurpose content at Rebel Based Media is by using Captivate's curated collections tool, which allows me to grab specific episodes of the Podcast Accelerator to create relevant playlists around specific blog posts. It's a good way to highlight your content, increase page sessions, and also give your readers a more relevant, useful experience. And you can see that I've included that in one of the screenshots on the right in the desktop. That is what a curated collection looks like, and that is how it's sitting at the bottom of a blog post. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to claim your podcast and get it indexed with Google Podcast Manager. So Google started indexing podcasts in 2019. That sounds a bit technical, but all it means is that Google shows podcast episodes in its search results, depending on what someone searches for. So you can actually play a podcast directly in Google's search results, as well as their dedicated iOS and Android podcast apps. Claiming your podcast on Google Podcast Manager is similar to submitting your podcast to other directories. There's just a few more steps, but you can do this in a couple of clicks with Captivate and probably with other podcast hosts too. Because of this fairly recent development, it's common to find features that will help you drive SEO benefit from your podcast within podcast hosting platforms. On Captivate, you can fill in SEO information for all your episodes, such as the title and description that is shown in search engines when they list your episode as a result. You can also use features like built-in clickable timestamps to help Google identify key events in your podcast and aid users searching for your keywords in voice queries. Just remember to add in your keywords often and speak clearly. And that will allow Google to crawl your audio content for keywords. And then another way, obviously, we spoke about it earlier, to get your podcast content ranking higher on Google is to do transcriptions, is to make blogs out of your podcast content and transcribe all that audio and put timestamps in. So to recap then, claim your podcast on the major directories and on aggregators like Podchaser and on Google Podcast Manager. Just make sure that your podcast has as much reach as is physically possible, and podcast hosts like Captivate are there to help you with this. Do your keyword research. Mention your keywords and phrases naturally in your episode show notes, script, and cover art. So, for example, if you start a podcast about music, guitar music, you're going to want to include references to music in your show notes, references to certain artists. You'll be talking about it naturally, so it won't seem awkward, but it's important to put those keywords and phrases in there. Third, make use of repurposing. It will help to increase your authority and improve your ranking for certain terms. Try and add value here by taking your podcast content and creating an infographic, a slideshow for social media, a video course, or a tutorial. So now it's on to the final section, which is launching and growing your podcast, 5 simple secrets. So you've published and distributed your podcast, and now it's time to celebrate. But it's also time to apply some longer-term strategies and approaches to help grow your audience beyond your initial launch into a sustainable podcast with an engaged audience and thriving community. So here we go. Number 1, set clear goals. Forget about download numbers for a second. What do you want to achieve with your podcast? What is your topic and where is your audience? Is there a community that you want to create? Is your long-term goal to create a business or launch a product through your podcast? This kind of initial goal setting is vital, as without this long-term vision, you'll struggle to grow and market your podcast. Number 2, maximize your podcast visibility. So focus on your niche and your audience. Before anything else, before publishing any episodes, make a short 1-minute trailer to introduce your podcast to potential listeners online. And get your website together. And this is easily done with Captivate's customizable podcast websites using services like Squarespace or WordPress. Create a clear, succinct tagline for your podcast. This, like a trailer, sets expectations of your audience and also gives you a chance to include keywords for SEO. And get set up on social media. Find out where your core audience is. Is it LinkedIn? Is it Twitter? Is it Instagram? Is it none of those? Is it all of those? Start creating lists of similar podcasts, potential guests, interact with your first listeners, and even if you don't intend to use it, it's a good idea to claim the usernames if they're available for your own brand equity. And then finally, try reaching out to some key figures in your niche. At least using social media or keeping tabs on similar podcasts in your industry or niche and reaching out to them is a really good way to broaden your reach and open your podcast up to new audiences. You can also stir up engagement by starting conversations and teasing new episodes, and you can do this by repurposing existing episodes, creating clips, and doing stories on Instagram, for example, to tease upcoming episodes and guests and topics. There's loads that you can do to promote your podcast and maximize your podcast visibility, even once it's launched or before it's launched. There's so much you can do. So number 3 is to create marketable segments for your show. So if you want to make your podcast more interesting and create a hook for social media and teasers, consider designing your show around funny, interactive, shareable segments. This kind of thing makes your content really easy and engaging to share over social media and in your community groups. So I've put here some really good examples of some popular podcasts here in the UK. So some ideas are Q&As, what's trending that week, hot or not, top 3 lists, etc., etc. But I've also chosen, Wittertainment's TV Movie of the Week. So that's a film podcast. And they have a segment called So Bad It's Bad, where they talk about notoriously bad movies. Then there's Last Podcast on the Left, Side Stories Hero of the Week. So that is a person that's done something particularly heroic or iconic that week. And then there is This Podcast Will Kill You. Their podcast is all about diseases and infections. And every week they do a quarantini cocktail recipe, which is based on that week's disease or germ. It sounds a bit weird, but it's a really good way to kind of blend your podcast topic together in a way that people can get involved with. It's fun, people like drinking, etc., etc. So number 4, go after one listener at a time. Instead of casting a net and building an anonymous number of downloads, try a more intimate approach. What a lot of podcasters don't understand is that if your goal is audience growth, then your podcast is your product. And what's the most time-tested way to market a product? It's word of mouth recommendation. So making personal connections with your listeners and creating meaningful content people want to share is the best way to grow it. Think about it this way. If you tell 5 people about your show per week, you'll have 260 potential new listeners each episode after 1 year. It takes seconds to tell someone, and you don't need to spend a penny. And who knows, maybe each of those people will tell another 5 people about your show, and thus your audience grows person by person, one by one, friend by friend. No Facebook advert could ever be a recommendation from someone you know and someone you trust. Number 5, ask your audience what they want. Understand that engagement means interaction and ask for it. And when you create something that people will love and grow attached to, they're more than just listeners. Ask them for their input. Ask them who they'd like to hear from or what they'd like to know about. And that way your podcast starts to become this big community where everyone feels like they can get involved and their opinion is valued and their feedback is valued. And that's ultimately how you're going to grow a really strong, sustainable podcast. When in doubt, ask your audience what they want and when they want it. When you create something that other people rely on and grow attached to, they're more than just listeners. They become stakeholders in that podcast. They become stakeholders in that business. They become friends. You may be the host of your podcast, but that doesn't mean that you should dictate everything and always do things on your own terms. Consider what your audience wants from you and don't think twice about asking them what that is. And like me, you'll be really surprised at what you hear. Audience feedback is really essential if you want to grow your show, but remember, you have to stay humble when listeners say things that you might not like to hear. So those are the end of my 5 tips. And good news. Starting a podcast is super, super easy and it's fun and it's really addictive in a good way. I promise you. If you've got a great podcast idea, however niche, there'll always be an audience out there waiting for it. So our advice is always just to go for it. So try Captivate for free. Captivate allows you to host multiple podcasts for one single monthly cost with 0 contracts. We're the only podcast host that allows you to host unlimited shows, gives you customizable free podcast websites and players, advanced IAB certified analytics, sponsor kits, subscription links, personal human support. We have 2 really good busy Facebook groups full of podcasters just like you who will be there to help you. We've got customer support in all the major time zones, so you're never alone no matter what question you have. We also host regular free live coaching with CEO Mark Asquith, where you can put your podcasting questions direct to the experts. And we're also on YouTube. We publish tons of YouTube content, tons of blog tutorial content. So if you're ever stuck for how to start, grow, or market your podcast, there'll be something on captivate.fm/blog to help you out. So head to captivate.fm/sign up to get a free 7-day trial of Captivate now. And I'd love to hear that you started a podcast. So if you do, tweet us at Captivate Audio. We'd love to hear if you've decided to pick up podcasting from this webinar. That would make me so happy. And it's been really lovely to speak to you today, and thank you very much for having me. And I will see you again soon. Thank you.